The girl disappeared from her own house in the middle of the night, leaving all her belongings behind. As soon as the police began their investigation, they were faced with a case that resembled a real-life horror movie. Every day they learned more and more unexpected and chilling facts that painted a frightening picture before them until they eventually managed to get to the truth. Ellie Garner was born on May 17, 1995, in Greenwood, North Carolina. Later, she moved to Colorado with her parents and sister, and the family settled in Riverdale. Since childhood, Ellie Garner was distinguished by her creativity. She created various crafts and jewelry from scrap materials, and also loved bright and unusual clothes that made her stand out from the crowd. In addition, Ellie Garner loved spending time outdoors. She could climb any tree, hang a hammock there, and enjoy the peace and quiet for hours. After finishing high school, Ellie Garner attended a local college and received a license as a cosmetologist, after which she got a job as a hairdresser. In the summer of 2018, when Ellie Garner was 23, she lived alone and continued to work in a hair salon. On Sunday, July 29th, a friend came to visit her. They sat in the backyard, talked, and he left. After that, Ellie Garner continued to text her friends for some time. However, the next day, the girl suddenly stopped responding to their messages. Relatives and acquaintances tried to contact her, but Ellie Garner did not answer, and her phone was turned off. Sometime later, her mother drove up to the girl's house and found that her car was parked near the garage. All of Ellie Garner's personal belongings were inside the house, except for her smartphone. All of this looked extremely strange, and Ellie Garner's mother immediately contacted the police. At the same time, the woman immediately said that she had an idea who could be behind her daughter's disappearance. Ellie Garner has repeatedly mentioned that she was stalked by an anonymous man for months. It all started in February 2018, about 6 months before Ellie Garner went missing. A stranger started messaging her on social media. At first, he seemed harmless, but then his messages became increasingly frightening. He asked the girl about her views on mass murder and generally acted very strangely. Ellie Garner tried to block him, but he immediately wrote to her from other accounts under different names or even contacted her on another social network. But that was only the beginning. In April, Ellie Garner received a video from this person, filmed late at night through the window of her house. In it, the girl was in her kitchen and gluing stickers to an album. Judging by the video, it was filmed less than a meter from her window, but that was not the most frightening thing. The person who filmed it was naked and satisfying himself. After that, the unknown criminal sent her several more similar photos and videos. What was happening seriously scared Ellie Garner. In addition to the fact that this stalker regularly entered the territory of her house, he somehow found out her address, which the girl did not indicate anywhere in the public domain. As a result, she decided to contact the police and gave them all the information about this person, including his accounts, correspondence, and the video he filmed near her house. However, the reaction of the local police department was very cool. They did not open a case under the article that would imply danger to the girl. Instead, they designated it as telephone stalking. Investigators also tried to establish who was behind all these fake accounts, but they ran into a problem. It turned out that this person was using virtual phone numbers issued on a special website. Therefore, in order to obtain information about this user, they needed a court order. Apparently, the police decided not to bother with this and simply put this case on the back burner. They did not even add to it the photos and videos taken by the stalker through Ellie Garner's window, although this was a clear violation of the law. The only thing the police did was advise the girl not to leave the house after dark, close the curtains on the windows, and sign up for self-defense courses. Ellie Garner was depressed by the fact that the police did not actually take any action, and she began to feel her own powerlessness in relation to this whole situation. The girl told all her friends and relatives about what was happening, and they also could not understand why the police were doing nothing. Meanwhile, messages from the unknown stalker continued to arrive, despite all of Ellie Garner's attempts to break off contact with him. As a result, the girl began to have serious problems with anxiety and depression. She could not think of anything except fear of this person, and the lack of any help from the police only worsened the situation. Her mother also tried to reach out to the police, and they sent patrolmen to her house. However, the officers simply drove down the street and returned, spending about 5 minutes there. This went on until May, One day when Ellie Garner was discussing the whole situation with her friend, he managed to get to the stalker's real social media account using one of the fake Snapchat profiles. It turned out that the account belonged to a man named Trevor Hale. Ellie Garner knew this man. They had dated for a short period of time when she was 17, but had hardly kept in touch since then. Having realized who was behind all this, Ellie Garner immediately contacted the police again. However, as expected, they did not take any new action. They did not talk to Michael and, in general, did absolutely nothing to protect the girl from him. Thus, Ellie Garner was again left without any protection from the police, and the fact that she now knew the name of her stalker did not change the situation in any way. At the same time, the girl continued to receive messages from him, and at some point the man began to openly threaten her. Ellie Garner was afraid to be home alone, so her friends began to take turns staying overnight at her house. However, on the day she stopped responding, none of them were able to spend the night at her house. The girl asked her friend, who had been visiting her during the day, to stay. However, he had a severe toothache, so he decided that he would only be a nuisance, since he would not be able to sleep all night. Now that Ellie Garner had disappeared, the police finally got down to business and began by examining the girl's smartphone activity. They established that Ellie Garner's phone was in her house until about 3 a.m., after which it was turned off. They also gained access to her social media accounts and found that the girl had been texting a friend named Thomas before she disappeared. She asked him to come over. He agreed. He added that he did not plan to take his smartphone with him and said that he would knock on the door when he arrived. However, based on the text messages, Ellie Garner canceled those plans. But when detectives started looking into Thomas's account, they got a rather unexpected turn of events. It turned out that it was registered to a virtual number from the very same website that the stalker used. The police also learned from the girl's friends that she had been communicating with Thomas for about 6 months, but had never met him in person. Based on all this, the police assumed that the stalker was actually behind Thomas's account, and Ellie Garner had no idea about it. At the same time, the girl wrote to him that she was home alone. After that, investigators obtained a warrant and requested all information related to the stalker's fake accounts. All this information directly indicated that Trevor Hale was behind them. It is noteworthy that all of his fake accounts stopped being active on the night of Ellie Garner's disappearance. Detectives began to look into Michael and found that he had quite a serious criminal history behind him. He had been arrested for burglary, public nudity, harassment, and fraud. After one of the arrests, the man was given a psychiatric examination, according to the results of which he was required to see a specialist for a year. At the same time, despite all the crimes he had committed, Michael did not spend a single day behind bars. The police went to his home to talk to him. However, the man denied everything, and they left empty-handed. However, a few days later, investigators received a search warrant for his home and seized all of his devices. Their analysis showed that Michael's smartphone was near Ellie Garner's house on the night of her disappearance. They also received confirmation that he was the one behind the fake accounts. Moreover, Michael created a new account and started texting another girl under the guise of an anonymous stalker just 53 minutes after Ellie Garner's smartphone was turned off. The police also found a lot of interesting things in the house itself. There was the victim's driver's license, a lock of her hair, and a stone from the necklace she always wore. In addition, they saw that real handcuffs were attached to Michael's bed. The discoveries did not end there. Having studied the man's online activity more closely, experts found a huge number of very disturbing facts. Based on his browser history, 4 months before the girl's disappearance, Michael Googled how long the human body smells. 3 weeks before the disappearance, he searched for information about missing girls in the area, and about a week later, he Googled how to survive in prison. In addition, he searched for Ellie Garner's profiles on all popular social networks and also opened the pages of various establishments near her home. 10 hours before Ellie Garner disappeared, he visited a website with an article about a serial killer nicknamed the Springfield Strangler. A few days later, he searched for information about another serial killer and also Googled how to delete photos from iCloud. Thus, all this information directly pointed to Michael's involvement in the girl's disappearance, and detectives had almost no doubt that she was dead. However, they still did not know where her body was, but soon everything changed. Among other things, A screenshot from a Maps application was found on Michael's smartphone, which showed a field near his house. Experts also established that the man's phone was in this area on the night of Ellie Garner's disappearance. As a result, the police went there with search dogs, and they quickly found a human body among the thickets of tall grass. At that time, almost a month had passed since Ellie Garner's disappearance, so the body was in a serious state of decomposition. Despite this, medical experts were able to establish her identity using her dental records and confirm that the deceased was indeed Ellie Garner. As for the cause of death, the experts were unable to come to any clear conclusion, since the degree of decomposition did not allow for the detection of almost any injuries. However, everything indicated that the girl could have died from strangulation. In addition, based on Michael's Google queries, he was interested in serial killers who preferred strangulation as a method of murder. Therefore, detectives did not rule out that the man could have done this to Ellie Garner. Immediately after this, Michael was arrested and brought in for questioning. This time, he changed his testimony and admitted that he killed Ellie Garner. Only his story sounded frankly strange. According to Michael, Ellie Garner agreed to make a video with him that contained perverted content and elements of torture, so that he could sell the recording to one of his regular customers. However, during the filming, according to the man, he miscalculated his strength and accidentally strangled the victim. Michael also added that the entire incident was captured on a camera, which continued recording the video. Realizing that Ellie Garner had died, he reviewed the footage and threw away the flash drive. Of course, the detectives did not believe this story, since it went against all the available facts. In addition, with a huge amount of evidence against Michael, the prosecution could have easily secured a guilty verdict. Based on the available data, it looked as if Michael forced the victim to leave her home, possibly threatening her with a gun. Medical experts also established that the girl's hands were tied with plastic zip ties. He then took her to his home, where he handcuffed her to the bed and killed her, after which he drove her body to a field near his home. However, investigators had another task. They were trying to figure out if Michael could be behind any other crimes. The fact is that in addition to the impressive amount of incriminating evidence in the Ellie Garner case, something else was found on his devices. There were dozens of photos and videos of various women who were jogging in local parks and other places. Michael followed them with a camera or filmed them from his car. When asked about these videos, the man did not deny anything and admitted that he secretly filmed attractive women whenever possible, but insisted that he did not harm anyone. Among his search history, police also found requests such as "where women run in Riverdale." Moreover, Michael Googled information about attacks on women that occurred while jogging. The police began looking into other unsolved cases in the area and came across one that matched Michael's pattern. 6 months before Ellie Garner's murder, an unknown assailant attacked a woman who was out jogging in the neighboring town of Ridgetown. He ran up behind her and tried to drag her into the woods, but the girl managed to fight him off and escape. It is noteworthy that, based on Michael's search history, he had repeatedly Googled information about this case. Thus, the police were almost certain that he was behind this attack. However, they could not charge him without any evidence. In addition, detectives began to think about Michael's involvement in another unsolved murder that took place in 2011 in a neighboring town called Bloomfield. Then 21-year-old student Sophie Watson was killed, about whom we already have a video on the channel. The girl disappeared under similar circumstances, and her body was found only almost 2 years later. The police still could not identify the culprit of this crime, and now they began to think about Michael's involvement. Digging deeper, they found out that Caitlin had complained to her friends that she was being stalked by an unknown man. But then the detectives came across a very unexpected lead. Michael's social media account contained a photo from a music festival where he stood with a group of friends, including Caitlin's fiancé. Thus, the police received confirmation that Michael could have been acquainted with the victim. However, all further attempts to connect him to this murder were unsuccessful. While Michael was in prison, awaiting trial in the case of Ellie Garner, his cellmate approached the investigators. According to him, Michael confessed to him that he killed another woman named Shelley and told him that he hid her body near the river. However, the police were never able to find a single unsolved case that would fit the facts provided to the cellmates. Thus, despite many suspicious threads connecting Michael to other crimes, he was never charged with any other charges. When the Ellie Garner trial finally began, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Michael's guilt, insisting that the man had committed a premeditated murder. The man's lawyer, on the other hand, had no compelling arguments in favor of his client's innocence. So he began telling the jury that Ellie Garner was essentially to blame for her own death. According to him, this was influenced by the fact that the girl had problems with anxiety and depression, for which she took medication. The lawyer tried to convince those present that it was these pills that led to her death, which sounded, to put it mildly, absurd. The prosecution rejected his arguments, stating that Ellie Garner's medical problems were in no way related to the fact that she was kidnapped from her own home and murdered. Despite the fact that there was a lot of evidence against Michael, the prosecution eventually offered him a deal. Perhaps they feared that without definitive proof like DNA, the jury might doubt the man's guilt and he would escape punishment for murder. 2 years after Ellie Garner's death, Michael accepted the plea deal, pleading guilty to the judge. He showed up to court with black eyes, apparently inflicted in prison, and gave a speech. The man said that he did not mean to kill anyone and that he regretted what he did. He also apologized to the victims' relatives who were in the courtroom and even squeezed out tears. Due to the fact that Michael confessed to the crime, a rather unpleasant situation arose in front of the judge. According to the terms of the deal, he had to drop 6 of the 9 charges, which greatly affected the sentence. Michael received a life sentence with the right to apply for parole after 17 years. Although this sentence seems extremely unfair, the man's release after this term is not guaranteed, and the parole board can deny him release for decades. It is noteworthy that Michael's mother also spoke at the trial and called for her son to be given the maximum possible sentence. Thus, the person guilty of murdering Ellie Garner went to jail. However, this fact is of little comfort to the relatives and friends of the victim. They all understood that Ellie Garner's death was caused not only by Michael's actions, but also by the inaction of the police, which could have easily protected her from this danger. After the murder, the local police department organized an internal investigation, as a result of which one of the officers who took the first statement of stalking from Ellie Garner was suspended for 40 unpaid hours. Finally, I would like to note that Caitlin's case, in which Michael was suspected, was solved in 2023. The criminal turned out to be her fiancé, who had remained out of the police's sight for years. The fact that he was friends with Michael, and they both turned out to be real maniacs, suggests that they could not only know about each other's crimes, but also commit them together. We will leave a link to the video about Caitlin in the description of this video.